History of Germany. For most of its history, Germany was a patchwork of semi-independent principalities and city-states, becoming a nation-state only in 1871. Yet movements and events associated with its territory, from the Hanseatic League to the Reformation and the Holocaust, have shaped the history of Europe since the early Middle Ages. The impact of figures including Charlemagne, Martin Luther, Otto von Bismarck and Adolf Hitler resonates today, when Germany is inextricably bound up within, and a leading proponent of, European unity. Tribes and the Romans. The early inhabitants of present-day Germany were Celts and later nomadic German tribes. Under Emperor Augustus, the Romans began conquering the German lands from around 12 BC, pushing as far as the Rhine and the Danube. Attempts to expand their territory further east were thwarted in AD 9, when Roman general Varus lost 3 legions, about 20,000 men, in the bloody Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. The Germanic forces were led by Arminius, the son of a local chief who had been captured and brought to Rome as a hostage. Here he adopted Roman citizenship and received a military education, which proved invaluable in outwitting Varus. For many years, Mount Grotenberg near Detmold in North Rhine, Westphalia was thought to have been the setting of the epic Teutoburg Forest battle, but no one can really say for sure where it happened. The most likely candidate is Koch-Ries, north of Osnabrück, where in the 1990s archaeologists found face helmets, breast shields, bone deposits and other grisly battle remains. Today the site is a museum and park. After Arminius' victory, the Romans never again attempted to conquer Germanic lands east of the Rhine, accepting the Rhine and the Danube as natural boundaries and consolidating their power by founding such colonies as Trier, Cologne, Mainz, and Regensburg. They remained the dominant force in the region until 476. Roman frontier lines. In AD 83 the Romans started building what is today Central Europe's largest archaeological site, a wall running 568 kilometers from Koblenz on the Rhine to Regensburg on the Danube. Some 900 watchtowers and 60 forts studded this frontier line, dubbed der Limes, the Limes. The 800 km long Deutsche Limstrasse, German Limes Road, cycling route runs between Regensburg in the south and Bad Honingen in the north, near Koblenz, largely tracing the tower and fortress-studded fortification. A 280 km long cycling route links Detmold with Xanten, where there's an archaeological park, taking cyclists past various Roman remains and monuments. What was the Holy Roman Empire? The Holy Roman Empire was a political union of feudal states that greatly influenced the history and evolution of Europe for more than 800 years. Some historians peg its origins to Frankish King Charlemagne, who, in 800, was crowned emperor by Pope Leo III in Rome. It was the first time such a title had been bestowed in Western Europe since the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century. However, not until the crowning of Otto I in 962 did the territory truly fall under German rule. It would remain so almost exclusively until the abdication of Holy Roman Emperor Franz II in 1806. The empire sometimes included Italy, as far south as Rome. Sometimes it didn't, the Pope usually had a say in that. It variously encompassed present-day Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, Lorraine, and Burgundy, in France, Sicily, Austria, and an eastern swathe of land that lies in today's Czech Republic, Poland and Hungary. As such it was a decentralist, multi-ethnic mosaic with many languages. Unlike France, Spain, or England, it was not a hereditary monarchy. Instead, emperors were selected by a small group of electors drawn from the ecclesiastical and political nobility, although the new king was usually, however distantly, related to the outgoing one. Since there was no capital city, rulers constantly moved from one city to the next. Incidentally, the term Holy Roman Empire was not used until the 13th century. In the 15th century, the words of the German nation were added. The Frankish Reich. Based on the Rhine's western bank, the Frankish Reich, Empire, existed from the 5th to the 9th centuries and was the successor state of the Western Roman Empire, which had crumbled in 476. Under the leadership of the Merovingian and later the Carolingian dynasties, it became Europe's most important political power in those early medieval times. In its heyday, the Reich included present-day France, Germany, the Low Countries, Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and half the Italian peninsula. Its most powerful ruler was Charlemagne, r. 768–814, a Carolingian. From his grandiose residence in Aachen, he conquered Lombardy, won territory in Bavaria, waged a 30-year war against the Saxons in the north and was crowned Kaiser by the Pope in 800, an act that was regarded as a revival of the Roman Empire. Charlemagne's burial in Aachen Dom, Aachen Cathedral, turned the court chapel into a major pilgrimage site. After Charlemagne's death, fighting between his son and three grandsons ultimately led to the dissolution of the Frankish Reich in 843. The Treaty of Verdun split the territory into three kingdoms, the West Franken Reich, West Francia, which evolved into today's France, the Ost-Franken Reich, East Francia, the origin of today's Germany, and the Mittelfranken Reich, Middle Francia, which encompassed the Low Countries and areas in present-day France and northern Italy. The Middle Ages. Germany's strong regionalism has its roots in the early Middle Ages, when dynasties squabbled and intrigued over territorial spoils. The symbolic heart of power in the early Middle Ages was Charlemagne's burial place, the cathedral in Aachen. It hosted the coronation of 31 German kings from 936 until 1531, starting with Otto I, aka Otto the Great. Otto proved himself on the battlefield, first by defeating Hungarian troops and then by conquering the Kingdom of Italy. In 962, he renewed Charlemagne's pledge to protect the papacy, and the Pope reciprocated by crowning him emperor and marking the birth of the Holy Roman Empire. For the next 800 years the Kaiser and the Pope were strange, and often uneasy, bedfellows. Power struggles between popes and emperors, the latter of which also had to contend with local princes and prince-bishops, were behind many of the upheavals in the early Middle Ages. A milestone was the investiture conflict between Heinrich IV, r. 1056–1106, and Pope Gregory VI over whether the Pope or the monarch was entitled to appoint bishops, abbots, and other high church officials. The Pope responded by excommunicating Heinrich in 1076. Heinrich then embarked on a walk of penance to the castle of Canossa in Italy, where the Pope was in residence. Contrite, he reportedly stood barefoot in the snow for 3 days begging for the excommunication to be lifted. He was eventually absolved, but the investiture question held the Reich in the grip of civil war, until a treaty signed in 1122 granted the emperor limited rights in selecting bishops. Heinrich IV was a member of the Salians, one of several powerful dynasties that shaped the politics of the early Middle Ages. Others included the rival Hohenstaufen and Welf houses. One of the most powerful Welfs of the time was Heinrich der Lohe, Henry the Lion, who reigned over the duchies of Saxony and Bavaria, while also extending influence eastwards in campaigns to Germanize and convert the Slavs. Heinrich, who was very well connected, his second, English wife Mathilde was Richard the Lionheart's sister, founded not only Braunschweig, where his grave is, but Munich, Lübeck and Lüneburg, too. At the height of his reign, his domain stretched from the North and Baltic coasts to the Alps, and from Westphalia to Pomerania, in Poland. Eventually, though, the Hohenstaufen under Friedrich I Barbarossa, r. 1152–90, would regain the upper hand and take Saxony and Bavaria away from him. In 1254, after the death of the last Hohenstaufen emperor, Friedrich II, the Reich plunged into an era called the Great Interregnum, when no potential successor could gain sufficient support, leaving the Reich rudderless until the election of Rudolf I in 1273. Rudolf was the first of 19 emperors of the Habsburg dynasty that mastered the art of politically expedient marriage and dominated continental affairs until the early 20th century.